In the order that you are on stage, and I don't want to forget anyone. We have David Massengill,
David Region,
Steve Suffet, Ann Price, Roger Sprung, and it's still going to sound like a banjo, so no matter what you do, give him some banjo joke later. And Mr. Joffen. So give a nice welcome to everyone, and we'll do a little workshop about music of the 60s.
Everyone having a good time? Yeah, I would just like to thank Faye and Saul Zeller for doing this. This Borderline Folk Music Club picnic is a continuation of a picnic that used to happen out on Long Island that Jean Ritchie hosted along with her husband George Picco until about 4 years ago. Jean since then had a stroke. George unfortunately passed away. Picnic had been hosted by the New York Pinewoods Folk Music Club, also called the Folk Music Society of New York, and we really want a hand for Faye and Saul and the entire Borderline Folk Music Club for continuing what had been a beautiful tradition. I'm going to talk very little, hopefully, and we're going to have a lot of music, but we do have a question to address, and I asked all the panelists to either in words or music or however else they'd like to do it, see if they can speak to how the music that we loved of the 1960s has or perhaps hasn't influenced and been relevant and informed the music of today. And I'd like without any delay to go right ahead and ask Josh Joffen, you want to jump right in? You've got yourself about 10 minutes.
We go by there. I don't know.
Talk slowly. Sing fast.
Okay, well, did I take your info? I should take it.
I don't think that you can argue that the stuff, that the music of the folk music revival of the 50s and 60s hasn't just had a ripple effect.
So are you going to go to the boat house?
Immediately. Hey, John, can you boost the volume on the vocal? Check. 1, 2.
Yeah, and where is
Okay. The music of the folk music revival of the 50s and 60s directly influenced the people that came along shortly thereafter, and it just rippled on through. I think that the effect is indirect, although there are some people that still do the traditional music and focus exclusively on the traditional music, but for me, my impression is that, sorry? Louder? Okay, I'll talk like this then. For me at least, well, you can tell from that song that I did about Michael row the boat ashore that this stuff has been a big influence. This song is based on a traditional song called The Banks of Pontchartrain, which is about, I don't know, 150 years old by now. But I wouldn't have done the song, I wouldn't have learned the song if I hadn't heard somebody else sing the original. The fact that it was Maggie and Terry Roach didn't hurt. And there is something to be said about the power of these songs to just to move us. Certainly true for me. She was tall and dark and slender, and she said that she loved the dance. There was something unspoken between us, but I dared not take a chance. We were something more than strangers when the hour of parting arrived. And she went west to her new life. She was bound for the Great Divide. Then word came that she'd married, and we all did wish her well. And I swore to profit from my mistakes and to heed the tolling bell. And if a girl should capture my fancy, not to let that girl go by. And I raised a glass to the sad salute to the girl from the Great Divide. Now fruit are for the picking, and I picked till I had my fill. But alone I'd find her photograph, and her face, it stayed with me still. Till a night in the crowded tavern, where I made ready to play, and she stepped up to me smiling, and the years just fell away. And we talked the moon down from the sky, and I brought her to my home. I laid a pallet down on the floor for her to sleep upon. But in the silence that followed my singing, she came into my arms. And the dawn was sweet and quiet, and the morning sun was warm. But the sea was cold at sunset, and I pressed her to my side. We could not speak, so we looked away, our feelings for to hide. Her hands were strong, and her lips were soft, and her eyes a smile did pass. But the rising tide, it drowned our steps, and the sand was smooth as glass. And her dark hair hid her face from me as I walked her to her train that would carry her west to her husband, to whom she would explain. She'd decide if she wanted her freedom. She would write if she wanted to stay. And I dreamed at night of the Great Divide, and her voice so far away. She was tall and dark and slender, and she said that she loved the dance.
I just want to explain where each of us is taking 10 minutes. And if you want to do 10 one-minute songs, that's fine, but you got 10 minutes.
I listened to a lot of that stuff. When I was growing up in my house, in addition to classical music records, we had Theodore Bikel and Murray and Miranda, a South African duo who have slipped into the mists of time. And we had the Almanac Singers, and more than anything else, we had the Weavers. And I listened to all that stuff, all those songs. Theodore Bikel, it was tough because 3/4 of what he did was in foreign languages. And it was years before I actually got the songbooks of his and could see what he was doing. But this was the stuff that I heard. This was the stuff that came into my core. This was the stuff that, that took hold in those formative years, aged 1 through 12, when your body grows to 90% of its adult height. And it's a large part of who I am today. I'm not going to play another song. I just, if we're talking about the relevance that stuff has, it's who we are to some extent. And we pass it on.
Oh, thank you. What I'd like to do now is ask a very good friend of mine, someone I've toured with, someone I sing with a lot, and a fellow member of the board of directors of the Folk Music Society of New York. Ann Price, you have something to say, something to sing? Go right ahead.
I have something to say and something to sing. I would argue that traditional folk music is alive and well. I'm on the board of the Folk Music Society of New York, and that is our slogan, and it's still true. Many of our members have been members since the 60s, and we're still singing traditional music. And I would say that traditional folk music has both a direct and indirect influence on the music of today. There are many songwriters now who have been influenced by the writers of the past, like Tom Paxton and Bob Dylan and so on. And I grew up listening to it all. I grew up first listening to Burl Ives when I was a little tot. And when I was about 12 years old, my camp counselor introduced me to a singer called Joan Baez. And from the time I was 12 until I was in my 20s, I wanted to be Joan Baez. And many people still say I sound like her. I learned every song she recorded. And she was like my alter ego. So I was in college in the 60s, from 1964 to 68. And we had a semi-annual hootenanny. It was called the Hunter Hoot, because I went to Hunter College. And fortunately for me, the man who became my first husband recorded some of those concerts. And I have some of them re-released now on CD on an album called Very Early Anne. Let me sing you one of the old favorites. You probably all know this, by Tom Paxton. Sing along, please. You can play along, Roger, if you like. In C, or in G. I'm sorry, G. He was a man and a friend always. He stuck with me in the hard old days. We never cared if we had no dough. We rambled round in the rain and snow. And here's to you, my rambling boy. May all your rambling bring you joy. Here's to you, my rambling boy. May all your rambling bring you joy. In Tulsa town, we chanced to stray. We thought we'd try to work one day. The boss said he had room for one. Said my old pal, we'd rather bum. And here's to you, my rambling boy. May all your rambling bring you joy. Here's to you, my rambling boy. May all your rambling bring you joy. Late one night in a jungle camp, the Joan Baez songs. Oh, I had such a hard time deciding which ones to do because I know so many. Okay, called the Wagoner's Land. Oh, hard is the fortune of all womankind. She's always controlled, she's always confined, controlled by her parents until she's a wife, a slave to her husband the rest of her life. Oh, I'm just a poor girl, my fortune is sad. I've always been courted by the Wagoner's lad. He's courted me daily, by night and by day, and now he is loading and going away. Oh, my parents don't like him because he is poor. They say he's not worthy of entering my door. He works for a living, his money's his own, and if they don't like him, they can leave him alone. Oh, your horses are hungry, go feed them some hay, and sit down here by me as long as you may. My horses ain't hungry, they won't eat your hay, so fare thee well, darling, I'll be on my way. Oh, your wagon needs grease and your whip is to mend, so sit down here by me as long as you can. My wagon is greasy, my whip's in my hand, so fare thee well, darling, no longer to stand.
Thank you. You have about 11 seconds left if you have some more to do.
Maybe here my set at 5, it's supposed to be 5:30, but we're kind of behind schedule. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions, anybody?
Come and buy my CD, especially even when this is very early and you can get to hear what I sounded like at the tender age of 19 in 1965.
Anyway, thank you very much. David Massengill, you have something to tell us, something to sing for us, maybe a little
I do. I have a traditional song I'd like to sing you that was a big hit in the 60s. I loved it. And also I have one of my songs I'm going to do a very short version of. This one was sung all through the years. Woody Guthrie did a version of it, but no one really got it until Dave Van Ronk found a chord progression that was just magical. And everybody was crazy about this version. And before Bob Dylan went in to do his first record, he mostly copied a lot of things Dave had shown him. And Dave told him not to do this particular song. And Bob said, well, okay, oops, I already did it. And that made Dave mad because it was sort of one of his signature songs. And people would say to Dave after that, do that Bob Dylan song. And that ticked Dave off. So he quit doing it. And now the story is, as Dave told it a little while back, is that Bob complained to Dave that he had to quit doing that song because they kept saying, do that Animals song that you do. Because the Animals made a big hit out of House of the Rising Sun. Now, on the day that Dave died, I got the call, and I remembered I picked up my dulcimer, and I started playing some of Dave's things. And I decided I would do a tribute record to him. It took me about 3 years to get them right, and this was one of the songs that I did. So I found a good version that Dave did, so this is my version of Dave's version of House of the Rising Sun. and me. Oh Lord, I'm my mother, she's a tailor. She sewed those new blue jeans. My daddy is a drunkard, Lord, brings down in New Orleans, where the only thing a drunkard needs is a suitcase and a trunk, and the only time he's satisfied is when he's only drunk. Go tell my baby sister, don't do what I have done, but shun that house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. Well, it's 1 foot on a platform and the other foot on the train. I'm going back to New Orleans to wear the ball and chain. Yes, I'm going back to New Orleans. My race is almost run. I'm going to spend my dying days beneath that rising sun. It was such a privilege to travel around with Dave. He took me under his wing. He heard me do a particular song, and he said, "Kid, I think we'll get along. Do you have a driver's license?" He didn't drive at the time. So I became his driver, his opening act, and his drinking partner. It's quite a trip we had. And he used to say nice things about you behind your back. He used to say that I took the dull out of dulcimer. Well, I did a bunch of little songs, and then I started sending them around to people. And one person I sent a batch of my songs was Pete Seeger. And Lord and behold, he sent me a little card back to thank me for sending him that little batch of songs. And he drew a little banjo on it. And he particularly liked one. He said he thought it would be good for people to sing the chorus song. I've got 8 verses to this, but I'm only going to get 2 because I don't want to keep in my time limit. But if you want to sing along on this particular song. And when I come back in January, I'm going to be playing the Borderline. I forget the date, but it's in January. Maybe some people here will learn verses of that song, and we'll all do a big mass version of it. It's called The Great American Dream. I'm going to do the first verse and the last verse. Oh, I wanted to say about Pete Seeger. Big in the 60s, I remember they kept talking about this song, deep in the big muddy, waist deep in the big muddy, and they wouldn't play it on my local station in Bristol, Tennessee, but they played it in Johnson City, Tennessee, on the college station. And I listened all afternoon one Saturday, and they played it, and it changed my life. So here's my tribute to that. I left the white sands of Zanzibar. Where is this place you call free lunch bar? I'm hungry and have overstayed my visa. Work your farm, your factory, pizzeria. Is TV more beautiful than the Mona Lisa? Someday my sons will fight for the eagle. My daughters will never be ashamed of me. Here's my dream, to be a citizen. It's the great American dream. It's the great American dream. It's the great American dream. Excuse me, sir, I am every man. I'm the good thief of Jekyll and Hyde. I'm the social climber on a mountain of pride. I'm the deaf, the dumb, and the debonair. I'm the mouse, the monk, and the millionaire. I'm the great white hope riding on an old gray mare. I'm the sad-eyed girl, as young as the earth. I'm the mother who died giving birth. It is my dream. It's the great American dream. It's the great American dream. It's the great American dream. I love freedom. I hope freedom loves me.
I have one of those postcards also.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of us might. But yeah, that is really nice. When I was 13 years old, I was able to take the subway. I lived in Queens. I was able to take it into Manhattan alone without having a parent and my older brother with me. And one of the first places I went to was Washington Square Park on a Sunday afternoon to listen to the music. And I think the very first time I was there in 1960, there was this fellow with a hat and a banjo that I saw over and over and over again. I didn't know his name. But he's still wearing the same hat. Roger Sprung. I think you have something to say and something to sing. Yes. 4. So, we're all over the boards.
Washington Square. Here we go. I started in 1947 in Washington Square. There was a man. As time went on, I found out it was the hub of folk music in New York City, at least. And a man named George Margolin was on at the Fountain area, and he played, and then more people came around. Before you know it, there were groups of people singing down in the square. Excuse me for a second. I was playing boogie woogie piano before that. I went down the square, and there were people of all ages. My brother pushed me down. He liked to sing off key, but he brought me down there, and he sang along with the people. In 1960, I'm not going to tell you what happened, but 1960, groups started. A lot of groups started up in 1960. There were a lot of individual performers as well before that. And I had a chance. I signed with Electra, with the Shanty Boys, and Folkways, which turned into the Smithsonian Folkways. Doc Watson and I were playing at Gertie's Folk City on the east side of Washington Square. And we decided to put out an album on Folkways, which is now down the Smithsonian Folkways, it's called now. And I started progressive bluegrass, which means everybody thinks you play bluegrass music, it's strictly bluegrass music, but you can play everything on it. Mozart, Hello Dolly. I had to learn Hello Dolly for the Empire State Building. There was a club there. And so you can branch out. So in the 60s came a lot of groups. This is the CD I have with Doc Watson, which I have here. I wanted to branch out in the 60s. I liked Irish music a lot. Got married in 1968 and joined a cultus, not a cult, but a cultus. And it's a group of Irish people. And I put out an album in the 60s, Irish Grass, which was an Irish ceilidh band and a bluegrass band at the same time doing traditional music. And it's quite interesting because the Irish band didn't want to have earphones on. So they had no idea that there was a guitar player or a mandolin player or a banjo player in the middle of their band. They just pumped away the Irish music, and it was a lot of fun, and it came out beautifully. In 1950, see, you got to talk about what happened before 1960 for songs, because the 60s came from the 50s, so it's sort of it goes right along. I signed a contract with Folk Say, which is Stinson Records. This is interesting. And in about 1960. Before that, I made two 12-inch 78 records with Michael Herman's folk dance group. Anybody know Michael Herman's folk dance group? Oh, wow. I did two 12-inch 78s. Before that, I made a couple of tablets that Moses brought down. This album was volume 2 of a Folk Say album, American Folk Say, volume 2. And I had a trio of Bob Carey, who I believe was in the Tarriers, and Eric Darling, who was a rooftop singer, walk right in, sit right there. And I made a volume 2 of 3 or 4 records. This is interesting, which one of my pupils came to me about 2 years ago and says, "See what I got." And she bought it from Barnes and Noble. And it's volume 2 plus volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. So with me was Pete. It's a combination. With me, Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, Cisco Houston, Lead Belly, Sonny Terry, Roger Sprung. I had to look twice because I was only on one of the 4, and they put the 4 of them into one CD. I got it here. You want it? And this is the Irish one that I have 12. I put out 48 albums. So we're going to do it.
The boys here?
The boys here? No, they're not here. Drew, you coming up? Drew, come up with me here. Drew Smith is on most of my albums, I guess. Yes, please. International champion auto harp player. I've been so fortunate to know East Coast champion guitar players, Danny Holland, and mandolin player, Arnie Solomon. They're all in my albums, and I know their parents. This is a song that's not a traditional. I like traditional music. I like to play them in bluegrass. Bluegrass is not just one kind of a song. I play Hello Dolly, you know. You can play anything. I play Mozart with bluegrass music, and I like the best traditional music. However, this particular song was written about 5 years ago, and I hope you like it. It just hit me. Singer-songwriter, the word singer-song sort of turns me off, with all due respect to all the people here. But I've changed, because this one is really a winner. It's about a grave on a hill, so I dig it. Drew, you ready? Drew there?
What are you going to do?
We're going to do a song written about 5 years ago called My Hillside Home, in the key of A. Drew's on my albums. I wouldn't pass him up for anything. He's the best. Very still on a hill by the river, looking down on the water flowing by. There's the one I will always remember, with a song in my heart and a tear in my eye. There's a stone with her name carved upon it, and the day when she left me here alone, and a place for my own name beside her, when I joined her to stay, and I knew this pretty stone with their well-tended flowers on the hill by the river, where my own true love was lying. In the shade of an oak tree, I'll sit down beside her with a song in my heart and a tear in my eye. Time goes by like an old flowing river. Someday I will go back to that stone to stay by her side on the hillside, with a song in my heart and a sweet love. Pretty stones with their well-tended flowers on the hill by the river, where my own true love was lying. In the shade of an oak tree, I'll sit down beside her with a song in my heart and a tear in my eye. Pretty stones with their well-tended flowers on the hill by the river, where my own true love was lying. In the shade of an oak tree, I'll sit down beside her with a song in my heart and a tear in my eye. It's a beautiful song. It just got to me. Any questions all about it? anybody here anything at all? Why we play these songs? Or what do you do here or there? Any hands at all? None. Okay. Okay. Time.
Roger Sprung. My mother was a jazz singer, and she played it, performed, sang. She didn't play instruments at some of the jazz clubs on 52nd Street in Manhattan. And she hated what she called hillbilly music. And when I was about 5 years old, just to drive her nuts, that's all I listened to. And around that time, I got a harmonica. And for about the next 7 or 8 years, I just went around tooting it. And that drove everyone even crazier, including my mom. However, I also came from a family that were members at one time of the Communist Party, so even though they didn't like this hillbilly music, in the background on the shelf was a copy of the People's Songbook. And there were also 6 songs for democracy and songs of the Spanish Civil War. And there was also a number of records by Paul Robeson. And as a child, I discovered those, and those are in my background. And it was when I went to high school that I realized that there were other people, and that was in their background also. And probably around that time, I discovered Woody Guthrie, and I also discovered Dave Van Ronk, and I also discovered Doc Watson and a whole host of people. Jean Ritchie, who, as I said, her own picnics were the predecessor of this one. And I just fell in love with that music. I wasn't very discriminating. It didn't matter what it was. It could be old-time music. It could be union songs, minor songs, songs about railroads and hobos, truck driver songs, bluegrass gospel. Well, anyway, this informed me, and I guess I never changed, because I write songs occasionally, but I don't see myself as a singer-songwriter. I just see myself as a folk singer. And as far as I'm concerned, the purpose of a folk singer isn't just to sing songs, but to get people singing the songs, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a union song. Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got my union front and back, got my union day and night, got my union to my up, got my union to my down. Said I got my union all the way around. You want to help me with that? Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got my union front and back, got my union day and night, got my union to my up, got my union to my down, 'cause I got my union all the way around. For those who want to join in, we're in the key of D. Ready? Now, I work 9 hours every day upon my feet. My boss, he lives way down on Easy Street. I make him $1, he pays me just a dime. And every time I holler, he says it's a bloody crime. Help me out now. Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got my union front and back, got my union day and night, got my union to my up, got my union to my down, 'cause I got my union all the way around. Now I had a gal, her name was Polly Ann, and she ran off with a mortgage finance man. First he took my money, and then he took my home, and then he took my honey, and he left me all alone. Ready? Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got my union front and back, got my union day and night, got my union to my up, got my union to my down. Now I got my union all the way around. Now one of these days we're gonna rise and shine. We're gonna hold that fort, we're gonna hold the line. Dump the bosses off our backs, don't listen to their lies. Solidarity forever means don't mourn, organize. Ready? Here we go. Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got 'cause I got my union all the way around. One more time without the instruments. Got my union to my left, got my union to my right, got my union front and back, got my union day and night, got my union to my up, got my union to my down, 'cause I got my union, everyone together, all the way around. Yeah! Well, thank you. I would like to thank all the panelists, Roger and Ann and David and Josh. And once again, I want to thank the Borderline Folk Music Club. We still have a lot of good music together. So let's, one last time, give it up for our panelists.